again to a PD session. So the past few weeks we've been looking at, I suppose, using Zoom, using online and face-to-face circumstances. And then today we're moving on to having a look at how we can use our online workspaces quite collaboratively, what we can use, what we perhaps have been using, how we might use them differently. So we're going to take a look at the Google Suite, or some of the different types of tools from the Google Suite that we have access to. So we'll take a look at why we might use these collaborative tools, what sort of situations we might use them in. We'll do a bit of a tool walkthrough, and we'll also have a go ourselves at what these might look like. So today it is me, Prue Gonzalez, with Lachlan, Kalache as well, and we'll take you through having a look at a couple of different elements of the Google Suite. So we'll look at our Google Drive, of course. We'll look at Jamboard, how much fun they can be. We'll look at Google Sheets, and we'll also look at Google Docs. And I'm thinking most of us in this room have used one of these tools in some way, probably quite recently. But what we'll do is we'll have a look at how we can use them in two of Lachlan's favourite ways, his two favourite words, synchronously and asynchronously. And we'll have a think about how we can use them in our classroom and really have that connected classroom feeling that we're really after. So I guess the first few questions that we need to have a think about is why would we use, what would we want from our collaborative workspace? So at the moment, we do have our face-to-face classes, but we've also got our online classes as well. And using a collaborative online workspace is a way that we connect across classes. We can connect in class and outside of class. There's lots of different ways we can do this. So we'll look at, issues around accessibility, having a cloud-based tools that we'll be using. We'll look at a little bit around storage repositories. So where are we storing when we're using anything on our Google Drive? Where is that stored? And how do we share access and different types of things there? We'll look at how we can actually use, I suppose, Google Docs, anything from the Google Suite as an individual, but how they can actually boost a little bit of our group productivity as well. So rather than sharing documents around on our email and having an email trail, we've actually got an ability to share a link with people and work within that document, and a bit of document control as well, which we will have a look at a little bit more closely. We're seeing some great examples of people using things like Google Docs and Google Sheets around peer-to-peer engagement within their subjects as well. So we'll go through a bit of an activity there, but it's a really nice way of getting students to work with each other to be able to create something while they're in an online classroom or a face-to-face classroom, something they can take away with them that might feed into other types of assignments, but also have them linking with students outside of class or in the online environment as well. So there's lots of reasons why we would use a collaborative workspace. There's also lots of ways that collaborative workspace might look within the different types of subjects and classes that we teach. Is there anything you would add there, LK?
Not at this particular minute in time, but I'm sure we'll get there.
Brilliant. So the first one that we're going to have a look at, and I might pass this one over to you, Lachlan, is to talk about Google Drive and how we can access that, and then what we can do from our Google Drive.
Thanks, Prue, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I am going to just drag something onto my screen. I've shared this PDF in the chat pod a second ago. It's a bit of a cheat sheet that was thrown together around creating Google accounts. For those of you that don't have a Google account, that looks at really the sign-up process, which is pretty simple, and talks through some of the points around why that is a good or a bad thing. And today it's of relevance, I guess, because it also points out some of the limitations or the caveats around having a Google account. So with that in mind, I've certainly put it in the chat for you to grab along with today's slides, but that's what I'm going to be looking at a little bit. And the process for getting a Google account, before we talk about why you might want one, getting one starts with the base address of accounts.google.com/signup. And that will bring you to this space. Now, the reason that most people that we come across, I suppose, in teaching spaces want Google accounts to begin with is usually the idea of a cloud-based or central storage, perhaps, that's accessible no matter where you are. So that's before we start talking about security issues or whether or not it's on university servers or whether or not it's protected by dual authentication, sign-in protocols, whatever the case may be. This is a central repository of sorts that's in the cloud, and it will give you the ability to store up to 15 gigabytes of data in the cloud. So that's our baseline, is that we're going to end up with an online folder or series of folders that will store up to 15 gigabytes. The way to get access to those is to sign up initially for a Google account. And the traditional way to do that is to actually create a Gmail address, which is synonymous with creating a Google account, but you can use an existing email as instead if you don't want to sign up to a Gmail account. I've just generally found that it's easier, because when I lose track of passwords, which happens inevitably, I'm able to go back and reset my Gmail password, and it's the same as resetting my Google password, etc. So it's just a bit easier for me to kind of keep it all in the same basket. Google, Gmail, Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Sheets. It's all sort of connected in my head. But the sign up process is very quick and easy, and they will prompt you to provide other security type details to make sure you can get the account. Sometimes they're looking for mobile numbers. You don't have to leave those. They're also looking for backup email addresses in case you need to reset things. You don't have to leave those, but they're going to prompt you for that same kind of two-step authentication information stuff, a backup, if you will, for if you lose your account information. But the reason that we sign up for these things is basically that it will give us access to the Google suite of tools. And today we're going to be looking at 4, I guess, of some fairly popular ones. Google Drive itself, once we sign up, is, as I said, is that online storage repository. And it will give us up to 15 gigabytes of storage, and it gives us access to the Google suite of applications. So what I'm talking about, basically, if I click on my Google Drive account over here, and you can open that up at any time by typing in drive.google.com. And if you haven't signed in already, it will ask you to sign in with that password, username and password you've just created. And if you have multiple accounts, which a lot of people tend to have these days, you can click up on the profile icon in the top right-hand corner. And as you can see, I've got a lot of them. And switch between various Google accounts if you like. That's usually something that happens to everybody. You're in the wrong account. But once you're in the Google Drive folder, central folder, you'll see that it will give you a thumbnail view of the things that you've accessed most recently or most often. Up the top, quick access, and then it will give you a list of files underneath. This account that I've jumped into has almost nothing in it, whereas my Google Drive account, that's not the case. I've got a bunch of folders that I've used to organize some things up the top. And then all these icons along the left-hand side refer to the different types of applications that have been used for these file types. So this kind of green cross thing is Google Sheets. The blue lines on the page is Google Docs. Then you'll see other types, whether they're slides or boards, things like that. You'll get used to what those icons refer to in terms of file types, but it's on the left-hand side here, you can see 15 gigabytes of storage, and I've only used 600 megabytes, and I've been using this for a while. So really, your 15 gigabytes in the free version of Google Drive is going to be fine for you unless you're storing media on there. So if we get into media, we're talking about video and audio storage. So as long as you're not trying to upload videos into your Google Drive folder, or audio tracks, etc., you're not going to use this 15 gigabytes. It's not going to happen. Photographs would be the other exception as well. They can be quite large. But there are other applications we use for those types of media anyway. Video, for example, we put video into YouTube. If you've got a Google account, you've got a YouTube account, which means that you can also store your video there. So generally speaking, you wouldn't be uploading multimedia into a Google Drive folder. So 15 gigabytes of storage. You've got a navigation menu on the left-hand side here, which gives you some clues about what you might be doing in this space. Any item that you add into your Google Drive folder, you'll be able to right-click on, and it'll bring up a menu that allows you to do certain things like share it, share the file, share the folder with different people. And that's probably the thing that most of us are doing in a cloud-based storage, is providing access to a central object or folder with other people. And you'll always get these two top objects in your navigation list, either sharing it as a general rule, the share settings, or getting the link. So we got our first question. What do we got here? Does that include Gmail storage? No, completely separate. So it's 15 gigabytes just for your Google Drive folder. Gmail itself, separate again. It's got its own limitations. Gmail's limitation is its limit is really to do with how many you can send in a day, because people will try and use Gmail for mass marketing purposes. You can set up bots and things to send out 500 flyers to 500 unsuspecting victims, etc., through Gmail. So it's Gmail's main limitation, to be honest, is that it will only allow you to send emails to a maximum of 500 people per day. So if you're doing more than that, then I'm in the wrong job, I guess. 500 recipients, those poor people. Anyway, getting on with Google Drive. When we use the share function, which we'll be clicking on a lot inside Google Drive, it'll bring up this same interface, whether we're using Jamboard, whether we're using Google Docs, Drive, and it's going to ask, do you want to share this object with particular people? And you could start typing in email addresses for people, and maybe they're in there. So there's Prue, for example. She's her email address is in there. So I could target someone that I wanted to share something to, or, and this is probably the most common use of Google Suite applications, we go down to this Get Link section, and we get the option to copy the link to the object, which is great. But, and this is what a lot of people forget, underneath, by default, those objects will be restricted, which means that, for example, at the moment, it says only the people that are added can open it with this link. Well, I haven't added anybody, so no one can open it. So I need to click on that restricted object and remember to select anyone with the link. So this basically makes your object an unlisted but public item. So if you're going to then copy the link and send it to people, anyone with that link will be able to open and work in that document. And then we move over to the right-hand side here, and we can see that there's actually further restriction on what people with the link can do. So we've got three options there. Do we want them to be able to edit the document the same as what we can? Sorry, I said document, might not necessarily be document. It could be any of the files that you've stored in here. Do you want them to be able to just look at it? Or do you want them to be able to add comments? So we have a bit of variety going on here in terms of whether you want them to be able to manipulate the base file, or provide comments around it, or just to look at it. So I'm going to close that for a second and have a look at the new button that's in the top of my Google Drive interface up here on the left, because that will allow me to do a number of things. One of them is I can add folders. If I want to organize my content in a particular way, I can add a folder to my Drive account, give it a name of my folder right here, and then it adds it to the folder list. And that by default is alphabetized. So we'll see that it's descending at the moment. And then other objects that I've got in here, I can then drag into my folder if I wanted to. So it gives you an interface. It hasn't deleted them. Really, all it's doing is just shuffling them around into folders to help you get organized. So we can create folders. If I click on any of those folders and right click, I can either rename them. I can give them different colors if I wanted to. I can also favorite them, because in the Google Drive interface, there's an option here to star objects. So if you just want to bring up your favorites, if you will, you can star them. So you can star files or folders, both basically. What else have we got going on here? I can rename it. I can also download the folder as well if you wanted a local copy of it. That'll give you a zip file with everything inside it. What else have we got going on here? If you can't remember what the name of the thing was that you were working on, but you know you were working on it just yesterday, you can use the recent option, and that will shift it to things and the times that they've been worked on, which can help. Perhaps someone else has sent you a link to a Google document that you were working in, but you just can't remember what it was called, then perhaps you want to check on the shared with me option, and that will then show you a list of Google items where someone has targeted you and provided your name in the share list. So these are different ways of finding objects inside Google Drive. Most of the time, hopefully you'll be working in My Drive, right? Your own personal folder. So this is our platform, our base for working inside Google applications. It's our online storage tool set, if you will, Google Drive, where we can store the stuff. Most of the time for you, it's probably going to be spreadsheets or documents, the Microsoft alternative, which for Google is Google Sheets and Google Docs. And we'll have a look at those in a second. But I think before we get into Google Sheets and Google Docs, I'd probably like something a little bit more fun. I can see people putting things into the chat pod as we go. That's great. Keep doing that, and Prue will pull me up if I'm talking too much, too fast, not enough, etc. So we've got our place where we store our files and where we can add new objects. Any Google application that you play with, you'll be able to also see the saved files from that application inside your Drive folder. So what I'm saying is it's not just the documents and the spreadsheets, but if you play with another tool like we're about to, we're going to look at Jamboard. It's a Google application, which means if we save anything in Jamboard, it's going to be inside our Drive folder as well. Any Google application. Now, the way that we find those inside Google, there's a few ways to get to this point. In the top right-hand corner, when you log into any Google application, you will see these 9 dots. And that's the icon for Google Applications. It's next to your profile picture. And by default, you'll see the most popular Google applications listed up there in that window. YouTube, for example, Google Maps, things that we probably all use to some extent, or at least some of them. The Play Store, Gmail's up there, Google's alternative to Zoom, Meet. Our Google Drive icon is right there. The main ones are listed up the top. However, if you scroll down far enough, you're also able to click on this More button, and that will bring up the full list. And there are thousands of applications in there. We're not going to touch on those today, but if you're curious and you want to see what people have been adding to Google's store of applications, this is where you find them. What we are going to play with today is Google Jamboard, which is a collaborative tool or a workspace tool, a brainstorming tool. Really, its application is up to you. If we just have a look at our slide for a second. Oh, great. There's a lot of information on here. Essentially, Google Jamboard can be accessed through jamboard.google.com. That's the same format for all Google applications. It'll be the name of the product, .google.com. So you get docs.google.com, sheets.google.com, drive.google.com. Sounding like a bit of a broken record, but that's how the address is if you can't remember it, or you can just Google it and put the name in, right? So if I went and did a Google search and said, oh, what was that thing we were using? It was called Jamboard. There it is, first link, and we can open it from there. Right, so what do we do with Jamboard? At the moment, it's not telling me much other than I've got a blank wallpaper, which is not fantastic. I can hit a plus sign down in the bottom right-hand corner to open a jam. So we might do this and just have a look at the interface for a second. I click the plus sign and it gives me an untitled jam, which is essentially, if you think about a whiteboard, it's given us a blank whiteboard to play around with. And up the top here, there's an icon that represents how many boards, it's called Jamboard, how many boards there are currently in the set, and there's only one of one. It's got a title up here that I can change. I'll call it blank thing because that's all that is. And I've got a space here at the moment that I can't do much with. If we look up in the top right-hand corner, our share settings are available to us when we decide who we want to get access to this thing that we're playing with. But really the most important part is this little navigation interface over on the left-hand side. Let's see if I can zoom in a little. Hopefully that helps a bit. And you can see it gives us a pen to work with. I'm sure it'll give us, there we go, different colors, different marks. So I can do some scribbling, etc. So far, not very interesting. An eraser, fantastic. A mouse that will allow me to select things or just point at them in this case. But really the most interesting thing in Jamboard from my point of view is the fact that it allows us to use sticky notes, post-it notes. And at that point, I can choose different colored sticky notes to add into my Jamboard. And from what I've seen, this is probably one of the core features that people like with this tool, is that everyone playing in this space can add sticky notes for their activities. So I'm sure you've taken part in some of those group work type activities where they're giving everyone a bunch of sticky notes and saying, right, add your sticky note to this wall, this board, and it goes up. And then gets potentially reorganized. So I've got a yellow one at the moment, maybe I want a green one, etc. I hit save, and it's added a sticky note, a post-it note to my page, right? Which I can then resize, rename, change the color, edit, etc. You can add images into this space if you like, if you've got them on your computer, or you can search for them. So roast pork, because I haven't had it in a while. There's a picture of roast pork. I can insert it and it goes into there. So you can add images into the Jamboard, etc. if you need to, if that will help with the activity. Shapes, a text box. And all of these objects can be moved around and shuffled around, etc. Lastly, it has a laser pointer, which is fascinating if you want to go, yep, the thing we're looking at is over here, and then it disappears. Or like that, or like that. Okay, so that's the interface by itself, which you might say, okay, there's nothing particularly special about that. I could then use these arrows to add additional frames and go again, keep going and move between the frames. So maybe that's got you thinking a little bit. What we have here, however, is some ideas about what we might like to do with a Jamboard. And I'll just move my Zoom menu out of the way. So what I'm going to do inside this Jamboard that I've created, got an activity here, which basically I'll give us some instructions about in just a second. But before we can take part in it, I'm going to need to give the share settings to the people. Most of the time, this is going to be a link. Click on share. At the moment, it's private to me. Well, that's no good. So I'm going to click on get the link. That's the link I want, but at the moment it's restricted. That's no good. So I'll change that to anyone with the link. It's no good if they're viewing it. I want them to take part in it. So I better change it from viewer to editor. And that means I can now give all of you the link. And you can click on that and jump in. And I will start giving us some instructions for the activity. And as you can see in Google Suite applications, I can see people jumping in. So there's 15, 16, 17. We've got a bunch of people in here. All right, so that's great. You're in here. So let's talk about how this activity is going to work. One idea, for example, is to use your post-it note feature to organize information. So what I want you to do is to click on the sticky note icon that's over here on the left-hand side. And the first thing I want us to look at is maybe we'll use the different colored sticky notes to address some of these questions. So if we were going on a holiday, for example, going anywhere in the world, where would we go? How would we get there? Who are we going with? And what are we taking? And we can click on our sticky notes to help organize that information. So here we go. Where we're going, use a yellow sticky note to put in your information, add it to here. So if I was going to go to that desert island, that's yellow, I can hit there, right? Don't forget yellow for where. How are we getting there? Green. Use the green sticky notes to tell us how we're getting there. Who are we going with? We're going to use the next color along, blue. And what are we taking? Pink. Okay, so we've got 4 different types of information, and then me in the background, I can start organizing the sticky notes. And green is, hang on, don't forget. All right, that's how we're getting there. Good. Who are we taking? Husband, family, etc. You'll see they stack on top of each other. So you'll be doing a bit of dragging. And as those contributions are added, we can then organize it. What are we taking? Taking photos. Good point. Right. And as those contributions are added, don't forget, you click on the sticky notes and we've given some instruction about what to do with those different colors, etc. Okay, yep, on the base version, the free version of Jamboard, we get up to 25 people in a Jamboard at one time. I've seen more in there, I feel, Prue, but it's usually people able to, I think after that point, we start to have issues with the interface jumping around a little bit. It makes it difficult to edit for some reason. And I'm assuming that potentially maybe that's what's going on. So if you're having a problem in here at the moment, because we've got more than, we've got 33 total people in this activity, but I can see only a few contributions. So if you're having trouble adding your sticky notes to this activity, do tell, share it in the chat pod, etc. Let us know what's going on. But I've seen a lot more than 25 in here in the past working with this, but I think they may have problems with adding sticky notes all at the same time, potentially. Anyone experiencing that? No, not so much. You can see different responses to me. That's interesting. Why can you see different responses?
I can see oxygen cylinder, sleeping bag, climbing.
Maybe mine is not refreshing. So I'll just hit F5. Let's see how we go.
I think, Lachlan, you're sitting on slide 2 or 4 that you have there. And when you hit the link, we're taken to slide 1. So it might be that you need to scroll across and check out the other ones. Yeah.
I see what's going on. Right. So remember we talked about having multiple boards at the top. So the link always sends you to Jamboard number 1. There's a lesson for us. Thank you very much, Prue and Esther, I think, was that sharing in that case. All right. So keep that in mind. If you want them to be taking part in Jamboard number 2, make sure you're getting everyone to go to number 2. So I can see what's going on. So there's a lesson for us there. So sticky notes, different colors, ways of organizing different types of information, and then we can potentially drag them around and reorganize them. Let's have a look at Jamboard number 3. We'll try this activity together. So make sure you've clicked across to number 3. At the top here, going to frame number 3. I can see who's in which one by clicking on my viewer. I could see a bunch of you are still over in number 1. So jump across to number 3. There's 15. And this time round, I've provided the instruction as text. With these sticky notes, let's think about the food that we might be having this week if we were doing some type of meal planning or something, fascinating. Different colors for different meal times. What are we adding in? For our breakfast group, I'll drag those down to the corner. Yellow for breakfast, green for lunch. Okay, green for lunch. We'll drag the lunch over here. Here we go, dinner. All right, so you get the idea. Eggs Benedict, yes, please. All right, so it's very easy to get everyone active in the same space. We're not having any problems with contributions this time. So there's our lesson. Make sure you get everyone in the right board, in the right space at the right time, and you should be good. All right, orange, snacks. Let's move those down there. So all we needed essentially was a link to share. Make sure that our share settings are what we wanted them to be. People are able to go back in and change their categories or colors if they need to. So maybe that's part of the activity, is getting them to think on how they organize that information and potentially change colors, etc. And go through that kind of exercise. So it's it could be used for concept mapping, for brainstorming, for some kind of hierarchy organization, etc. As an activity, but all you need is your blank board, an idea of how you want the information to be organized. And as you can see, it starts to get pretty crowded pretty quickly if there's a lot of contributions. Right, so that's obviously why multiple boards might be part of the activity, because then you could skip to the next one and say, right, now we're going to have a look at, the next part of the activity. All right, so that's Jamboard in a nutshell. Another feature that you may or may not be interested in with your boards is that you can add a background picture for your boards. So you, for example, might want to upload an image as the background for people to work on. So if you've got an image that you've prepared before, maybe it's not the Golden Girls, maybe it is, and then people can work within that image for how they're going to either add sticky notes, etc. So that's done by hitting this set background option, by the way, and it'll allow you to choose from these fascinating default backgrounds, or you can add an image. Okay, and at that point, you go through your image search. You can do a Google image search or add your own, and it will add that as the background. There we go. Yes, perhaps if we were giving personality types to each of the people in the room, we could then label them using our stickies, as someone has done here. So yeah, look, that's Jamboard in a nutshell. It's built around the idea of creating a space that people can jump in together. You just give them the link. Would it work over time that you want people to contribute to, or is it only something that's going to work when we're all there at the same time together? That's always a consideration with these tools. Synchronous only or asynchronous, it is completely anonymous. Absolutely. It's a really good point, Therese, is a lot of the Google tools tend to work like this unless people are signing into their own Google accounts before joining. But in any case, inside Jamboard, you don't get to see contributions by name. The other thing that I would add, if we click on our 3 dots here, always look for the extra dots with Google tools. What are our options that we have? We can download our Jamboard, our contributions, as a PDF. So it's going to be an image capture of everything that's happened in our Jamboards, which gives you obviously that artifact to use for other purposes, which is good. Maybe if you're getting students to work in groups inside Jamboard and you wanted that kind of evidence, or that sharing back to the rest of the group, that part of the instruction is that you need a PDF at the end of it. It can also be duplicated and then modified. That's the case with a lot of Google objects as well, is that people are able to duplicate them and then modify from the base. You can also delete it from here as well. The thing I want to direct your attention to before we jump into some of the other Google tools is this option about version history. And this is, for me, maybe one of the best features of Google applications, is that most of them will have a version history option that you can have a look at. And that will show you a list, time-based, on all the modifications that have been made to your Google application. So if you're going through a list, perhaps something's changed, think about that document where stuff's disappeared. You're able to actually go back through all iterations of that application that have been made over time and jump back to previous versions to restore them. This will be a lot more obvious when we look at Google Docs and Google Sheets, but the version history is an amazing feature that allows you really to never lose track of stuff that you've done in the past, which is something that I really appreciate as someone that is scattered most of the time, I suppose is what I'd say. All right, before I jump into the next bit, Prue, have we got any feedback, questions, anything of that nature? Anything you'd like to add?
I think at this stage, there's been just some of the questions that you've covered just around whether or not it's anonymous. How do you know which person you are? within Jamboards, or for that matter, any type of Google app that we might be using. So I think you've covered off on those. I think we're running smoothly, but if anyone has posted a question and I've missed it, it got a little bit wild there in the chat box. Please just let us know.
All right, cool. Yeah, please feel free to jump in with questions and other things. All right, so look, there's Jamboard. That's our first collaborative online tool that we're looking at today, apart from Drive, which was for storage. So I've got a brainstorming or whiteboarding type tool that we just need a link to give to people for them to play around with. The next one that we're going to have a look at is Google Docs. Okay, now this one may seem fairly obvious to people, but I'm going to show you a few of the features. Don't forget the Just Google It document, the cheat sheet that I was referring to before, which takes you through Drive and also Google Docs. That's what I'm going to sort of be looking at on the side here as I go. So I'm going to start in my Google Drive account. And the icon that I'm looking for Google Docs is this blue square that tells me that it's a Google Doc. But let's start by adding a new one. So I'm going to add a document into my Google Drive account, clicking on new, and then it's at the top of the list of Google applications that I've used recently. I can get more if I want to get more apps, but I'm going to start with Docs. That's the most common one that I'm using. And I get an untitled Google document. All right, so same deal. I can click on the title and rename it on the spot. It won't let you save something as untitled. You're going to get prompted to title it before you can jump out. So let's call this example document. If I wanted to star it and make it a favorite, I could do that on the spot as well. You may have noticed while I was typing that there was a little saving ... piece of text that was next to the heading. All Google applications auto save, right? There's no file save option really there that's necessary because it's all updated as you make changes, which is amazing. If you're someone that forgets to save, it saves it as you go. And as I said, if you ever get to the point where you've lost track or the information that you had was done beforehand and it's not there anymore, you use that version history option. And Google Docs, that'll be the first thing that I point out to you. Google Docs has exactly the same feature available. If we click on the first menu there, File, we will see a version history option there that's available as well. You can leave that open. It'll sit there on the right-hand side. At the moment, this is our current version that was done at this time. But as you jump in over different times or other people jump in, that list will become populated and you could jump back to previous versions if you want to. All right, I'll jump out of the version history for a second. All right, so look, Google Docs is basically a simplified version of Microsoft Word. That's probably the easiest way I can put it. They've taken the most popular or commonly used functions from Word and put it into a free cloud-based tool that allows you to create as many documents as you like. And most of the functions that you'd be looking for in a document are going to be here. That's as a general rule. It's generally all about the user interface with Google objects. And so they make it as easy to use as possible. So you get your text that you put in there, etc. And you start typing and off you go. It's saving it on the spot. You can do your standard things, work in a whole bunch of fonts, change your fonts, change text sizes, zoom in, zoom out, print, change, obviously, your different, what's the word I'm looking for? Things like alignment, add in links to the document, etc. With Google, usually it's a matter of putting the text in, highlighting the text, and either clicking the link button itself or right-clicking on the object, and you can drop a link in that way. You're always able to right-click inside Google Objects to bring up different options inside it. So for example, if I typed in something there that was deliberately spelt wrong, I could right-click on it and it's straight away bringing up a spell check function on the spot that will change it. So you're seeing similar kind of tool set and features that you get inside a Word doc. But as we said, it's saved it as we go. It's saved in the cloud, which means that it's now potentially accessible. Up here in the top right-hand corner, we're looking for our sharing options. Again, if I wanted other people to be able to jump into this space, I've got to share the document. Am I sharing it just to one person or am I sharing it to a group? If I hit get link, again, it gives me the link, but it's restricted. Change the restriction settings. Now, anyone with a link can grab this. Do I want them to be able to edit in here, add comments in here, or edit the same document or just view it? So this time around, I'm going to choose commenter. I've grabbed the link already. I'm going to drop that link into our Zoom chat pod, which gives you all the option to then jump into this document. And I can see people doing that. See what you can do to it. Over here on the right-hand side, people are adding in comments as we go. Okay, so you can see straight away, commenting is possible by sharing the link. Those comments are then grouped on the right-hand side. There's a little commenting box. I can collect all of those together. So you may think that this has got similarities, for example, to track changes. It's the same sort of functionality that we get in there. I don't really like the commenting option. I'll tell you personally, I feel that it's yes, messy, absolutely. It's also adding different colors as well based on people's icons. So this is just potentially a point, and people are able to drop in comments as images, for example, and adding other things in there. So thank you all for demonstrating maybe why commenting with a large group of people can get out of hand. Let's change the share settings around. I'm going to start a new document because I think just working with that original one's just going to be too hard for a second. Maybe if I select all and get rid of it. Hang on a tick before you add in your suggestions. I can see they're all waiting. They're Prue waiting to add comments to it. This time round, I'm going to change it from editing to suggestions. So this time around, I've put in my text. It says Lachlan thinks so there's my thing that I've added in there. This would be a great idea. What do you guys think? And you'll see that that suggesting aspect adds it alongside, again, as comments summarized through the box on the right-hand side. I can see them all coming through. And you can then attention those comments either individually. I could reply to them if you wanted to, or mark them as resolved, for example, if it was done. Okay, so again, the more people you have in these spaces, particularly when it's free form, it can get a little bit out of hand, but that suggesting function will leave your original text intact. It might not look like it right now, but it will. Okay, if we then take our option again and change it to viewing, suddenly everyone just gets to look at the document. And in my case, I get a final version that doesn't have any of the suggestions or comments in there, right? Which isn't fantastic. So that's the third one, is viewing. Now, the other functions we want to look at in Google Docs, what else can we do in this space? I want to show you, let's remove all of those for a second. Inside our tools option, inside Google Doc menus, we go across to tools. You'll see it's got word count features, it's got spelling and grammar, etc. The things that you want in there. It also has an interesting function called voice typing. And if I turn that on, it gives me a little icon over here on the left, and I can start talking. And as I'm talking, you'll see that the text coming through is typing straight onto the page and down further the page as we keep going. So we've suddenly got a fairly sophisticated text to speech, wrong way, speech to text tool that will take notes for us onto the page. Okay, so I really like this particular integration that they've put into Google Documents. There are paid versions of software that will do this better, but you also have to train them. I'm not sure if you guys have had a chance to look at things like Dragon, for example, or other types of speech to text tool sets, but the one that Google has embedded as part of their tool set is pretty good. So have a play around with that. You can pause it if you need to by clicking on it, and it's stopped. And we find it by clicking on Tools inside our Google document and down to voice typing. Okay, so it's pretty nifty. And I would suggest as well that, yeah, absolutely, that students might like to use this themselves as well. I don't know in terms of accuracy, really. I haven't tried to rate these alongside tools like Zoom's transcription tool with any degree of accuracy. But from what I've played around with in this space, the Google voice typing tool is pretty good. So yeah, by all means, and you can just leave it off or on at different points. So yeah, it's in the tools menu. It's pretty handy. All right, very quickly, because time is getting away as it always does. What else can we do inside a Google Doc? We've got our normal formatting options, alignment, bullets, numbers, spacing, etc. Spacing, some people can't find that. It's a bit hidden over on the right-hand side there, but if you hover your mouse over any of these things, you'll get your, what's a term, Prue, for the pop-up bubble with the text? Tagline? I can't remember what it's called. It'll come back to me, but hover your mouse over the top, it'll tell you what it does. You can drop in images into your document if you need to, or you can search, give a text for it. It'll bring up the search integrated inside the document. So if I was looking for breakfast ideas, give me some food. Okay, excellent. There's my image. And at that point, I can insert it directly into the document. So yeah, you can add in images and then resize them if you need to. It does the same stuff that Word does, really is the bottom line, but I find it simpler to use. It's stored centrally. I can give people a link. They can all get in there. Just be careful about obviously what you want them to be able to do once they can get access to it. All right, and don't forget version history. I keep saying it again, file menu, version history. And if we turn it on, of course, you'll see that we already have the ability to jump back to the original version if we needed to. Okay, so the version history is pretty powerful. On the left-hand side in Google Docs, we also have the ability to turn on an outline tool. And really, this is like adding chapters. All right, so if I was, for example, to put in the top of my document, it's a bit hard to see at the moment. Let me see. Let's call this heading 1. And I was to underline it, you'll see straight away that it's added the chapter over here automatically on the right-hand side. So Word has a similar functionality if you ever want to organize a title page, a contents page, for example. Google Docs does it automatically through the outline tool. And really, it's all about underlining. The moment that you do that, you're able to organize your information, and then you can use it as a navigation to jump between different parts of the document, which is a nice feature to have on. If you don't want it on, hit the back arrow, it'll disappear, and then that outline function will sit there on the left. All right, Prue, how have we gone? Any verbal abuse in the chat pod?
No, none that I can see. No, at this stage, it's been rather quiet because I think everyone has basically been typing in your collaborative docs. So I think we've got our questions out of the way that way.
Excellent. Okay, so Google Docs, and we'll see, remember that was called example doc, and we said that it was saving automatically. If I needed to then grab that document and download it, again, through the file menu, you can get it in different formats. So if you want a PDF, for example, from there, you can. If you want a Word document version to then share in emails, etc., like a soft copy of the cloud-based document, you can get it from here, from File and Download. You're also able to email them directly from, it'll use your Google Drive email, your Gmail address, if you've used Gmail to email. But to be honest, the most common use of anything created in Google Docs is probably to click share, get the link, and then you'll drop that into an email, for example, or wherever you need it in an I2 site. Okay, moving right along. Thank you all for your participation inside our Google documents. Let's have a look at Google Sheets. Again, inside our Just Google It cheat sheet, Google Sheets is down the bottom. If Docs is an alternative to Word, Sheets is an alternative to Excel, simplified version. And you'll find that it has a few interesting features that allow you to organize information in an interesting way. That's a bit easier, I find, than Excel. Some people are a bit intimidated by Excel, I find, because higher end functionality takes time and training and practice. Whereas I find with most Google products, you know, if you play around with it for half an hour, you'll be fine with it indefinitely. Okay, so I'm going to open a Google Sheet. Was there a question there, Prue?
Yeah, there's a good question from Monique, and it's just asking about within your Google Drive, if you have a shared document that's shared to you, are you able to put it into a folder? Can you organize something that's been shared with you?
Yeah, so two ways. You could either move it into a folder or you could duplicate it. If you duplicate it, then you've got a copy of it and you can put it in your folders as well. That's a good question. Yeah, absolutely. When things are shared to you, so I'll click on shared with me, for example. I didn't make this document, this guy did. And if I want it, I click on it. I can, you'll see I can't show its location because it was someone else's. So it's being shared from their location, but I can make a copy. So yeah, that's, you know, basically a quick way of getting hold of it yourself, but then you wouldn't be making changes to the original, for example. It'd just be a backup. It's a really good question. All right, so look, if I'm going to make a new Google Sheet, same thing that we did with Docs, we click on New, we go to Google Sheets, and it opens a blank spreadsheet. So we've got our usual suspects here. We've got rows, columns, cells, same terminology. But what we get with Google Sheets as well down the bottom, if I just move my Zoom menu out of the way, is we also get our tabs for working in. And the tabs are really important in Google Sheets. We'll give it a name for a second. Because not only can you click on them and rename them, which we could always do. I'll add in a few tabs. Each of those, I think Excel's terminology is, what are we talking about? Workbook as the collective whole, and sheets, worksheets within each of the workbooks. So the tabs allows us to organize those and change to different spreadsheets within the one location. We can then share access to those through the share menu. And then you can also add things like colors, etc., to help organize that information, duplicate all the information that's inside that worksheet, hide them if you don't want them to be visible. Particular ones you might not want them to be visible to students. If you want them to be locked, they can be protected as such, so people can only look at them and not change them. So there's a few options in terms of the control that you might have over each individual spreadsheet. You're also able to see all of them at once, but not forgetting, of course, that if you want to share what goes into your spreadsheet with other people so they can all populate the same spreadsheet at once, we will click on share, get that link, make sure it's not restricted so that people that have the link can do something with it, and change it to the share type that you want. So in this case, I'll change it to editor. I'll drop that link in here. I don't expect anything amazing to go in here, but if you want to click in there and start typing things, you're certainly welcome to. But this is now a shared central spreadsheet that people can start working in. So that means really obviously double click inside the cells to type directly into them if you want to. Yeah, that's a simple one with spreadsheets. Some people go, why can't I type in there? It's not working directly. Well, sometimes you need to click twice to be able to edit what's in there already rather than going over the top of it. So yeah, your usual arrangement, you can delete and move columns around if you need to. So if I wanted to get rid of that cluster, you can certainly select them all and then delete them. But it's going to give you, I would suggest, I reckon about 80% of the functionality of Excel. And the only things really that you're going to be missing out on inside using a Google Sheet are perhaps it's easier to do complex formulas. That's what I would be looking at with Excel. Other functions like mail merging, I don't know. Do people mail merge anymore, Prue, or is that like a 1990s thing? I don't know.
Possibly before they use their fax machine, they might do a mail merge.
Ooh, low blow, low blow. Yeah, well, anyway, it's easier to mail merge in Excel, Prue, so there. All right, so yeah, you can highlight rows and colors. It's a spreadsheeting tool. It's relatively easy to use. You can share the link out so that people can populate it. And again, use the file menu to either look at the version history to check if changes have been made or you need to roll back, or download it if you need to. If you need a PDF version or an Excel version, you can certainly do that. So someone's grabbed some information from an Excel document and they've dropped it in there, for example. So you can certainly paste information in. That's a really good segue, whoever did that. So thank you. Can I explain the filters? Ooh, okay. Yes, I can explain the filters. How do I use the filtering? Well, filtering is usually obviously about organizing either column or row-based information. But the filter option in here is up here on the right-hand side where the funnel is. If I hover my mouse, it says that I can create a filter. If I wanted to create a filter, click on that. And then I can identify ranges for what I want to use them for. But most of the time, it's about organizing column-based information. And if you click on any of the drop-downs next to a particular column, it'll allow you to start determining what information you want to be viewed. I'm probably going to find it a bit difficult to do that inside this document. I need to play around with it a bit. I actually have a video on making filters, Monique, that I might send you the link for rather than today because we're at time, if that's okay. Yeah, but you can certainly create filters in here. What I just want to show you quickly is some examples of how Google Sheets have been used collaboratively within subject sites. You can work offline if you're working in the same Google document, but you need the desktop application, Randy. So if you want to work offline in Google, you can, and it will then sync back to your cloud-based version, if that makes sense. You actually need to download a Google desktop application to work in Sheets or documents offline. So again, that's something you need to look up. Look, I just want to show you some examples of how people have been using some of these tools. So we bring this up sometimes where staff have used Google Sheets, for example, as a tool for students to work in groups and provide information over time. So in this case, it's a management subject, they've provided a spreadsheet for the students to use where they want them to be populating it as a group over time. So their tabs in this case have been organized by weeks, week 1, week 2, week 3. It's essentially almost like a journal to have a look at over time. The students have populated that information in their groups so that I guess the academic can also keep tabs on where that information is, and the students have a record of the work that they've been doing. So this would have been accessed via a link, or they would have taken the Google Sheet and embedded it into a subject site. And here we have an embedded Google Sheet inside an I2 site. Okay, so somehow taking the link from the Google page and making it part of the content editable, so the students can click on it and still work on it within the I2 site. So look, this is called iframing or embedding. And it used to be very easy to do inside I2. It's been made a bit harder by some of the changes to I2, but I still want to show you how to do it. At least this will go into the recording. So if you need to take off, obviously time, etc., do so. But I'm just going to run through how we can still take our Google documents or our Google Sheets and embed them within subject sites so that people can edit the collaborative space directly. So stick around for a second and I'll show you how to do that. So how do we get this? We started with a Google Sheet. It's here. When we click on our share settings, we get the link to the document. And at the moment it's set so that anyone with the link can edit. So that's fine. I'm going to take that link. Now what I'm going to do is open up H5P. So the H5P toolset, so our interactive objects tool sheet that people can get access to through h5p.csu.edu.au. If that's looking familiar. When you have access to a subject folder for H5P, I'll go into one of these. That'll do, Justice Studies. If you open up your H5P content folder, one of the content types that we have in H5P is called the Iframe Embedder. So I'll just wait for that to load. If we scroll down here from our different types of content, down to the letter I, we have an iframe embedder, which allows us to take a URL, so a web address, and embed that within a web page. So I'm going to use this tool, the iframe embedder. I haven't used it in this subject before, so it'll prompt me to install. We'll do that quickly. It's now available. I'm going to use it. And all I need for this, down the bottom here, is the source address. So I can paste the link to my spreadsheet right here. And then it asks for a title for the object, blah, blah, blah. There's the title, a width, and it tells me over here that the default is 500 pixels. So if I put in 500 pixels, you can resize these to whatever you like, but I'm just following the defaults that are provided here. And a height, 500. So I've now got my link. And if I hit create, this is what my embedded object is going to look like. And if I click on this embed button that's at the bottom of it now, it gives me some code. So I'm going to take that code, jump back to an I2 site. Let's find any I2 site. I'll delete in a second anyway. So that's an old one, so I can't do much in there. How about just jump into a subject where I can delete things straight away. Let's go into that one. That'll do. There's the content area. Build content. I'm going to make an item. Embedded Google Sheet. Right, I've clicked inside the content area. And over here on the right-hand side, I've got my code, source code button. Click that. I can now paste in that embed code that I got from that iframe embedder tool. Hit save. And it's now embedded it inside the subject site page. If I hit submit, that Google Sheet is now part of my learning materials. And it is, by clicking on it, double clicking on it, the students can then type straight into the shared space. Okay, so we've got our shared cloud-based accessible object we can give people links to, or you can embed Google objects directly into subject sites. A word of warning though, you can't actually embed Jamboards. We tried that this morning and Jamboard told us it won't let us do that. All right, so we have a tool that allows us to, collaboratively work inside a content area or even inside the subject site. So that might be something that you'd like to think about. All right, look, I'm going to hand it back to Prue for any other questions and comments towards the end of our session. Of course, we've gone over time. But other than that, we thank you for joining us for another Tuesday session.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lachlan. I hope everyone's got some great ideas of how they might use all these great online tools to work more collaborative with colleagues and with students as well. So thanks everyone for coming along. Have a great day.
Thanks, folks. Have a great week. We'll share the recordings and all the files, etc., through the Subdean's Learning and Teaching. Thanks, everybody.